Hello again. Today we're going to talk about the future of money. And I think the days of change rattling in your pocket are rapidly coming to an end with the arrival of new ways of payments, from cryptocurrencies to mobile payments. And even you look in Ireland, that in the last couple of weeks or months we've got rid of the 1 and 2 cent coins. So this is an area that is changing really, really fast. And look, what I want you guys to do is tell us about yourselves. But first, what about you, Mike?
Sure. So I'm Mike Jaconi, the founder and CEO of Button. We're a deep linking platform for the mobile app economy, passing context and in the near future, payment credentials, and making the transition of commerce between applications a more fluid and seamless process.
And Max, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Max Keiser. I host or co-host the Keiser Report on RT, and I'm also a co-founder of Bitcoin Capital. So we are a VC fund that pays daily dividends in Bitcoin.
Right. Over to you, Julio.
I'm Julio Faura. I lead R&D in Santander Innovation, which includes the new venture creation and venture capital as well, and I'm leading the cryptocurrency efforts and thrust that we're doing within Santander.
Right. So what we have is a rapidly changing world, and I'm wondering where do banks fit into this? I mean, what do you think? You're heading up innovation here. So what are the banks doing?
Well, if it deals with money, I'm guessing that banks will have something to to contribute with this. I think it's a very interesting moment. We're really debating the very nature of money, and we're debating really the role of trust. And it's really a moment in history when we're thinking whether the banks will keep going being the real repositories of trust and guarantors of trust in the system. So the boundaries between banking and commerce and payments and all these things are really blurring. So it's a very interesting moment. What we are doing is we are learning very quickly to collaborate with the startups and work in what we call the outside-in innovation. So the ability to work very quickly with smaller startups, innovation, and import this innovation into the bank. So we have our venture capital fund that we launched last year, $100 million. We are investing in anything related to fintech, including cryptocurrencies as well. You know that we invested in Ripple. We announced that a few weeks ago. We are innovating in payment rails, like new global payment rails, global wallets, that sort of thing. Robo-advisors, wealth management, and of course cryptocurrencies that we believe have the potential to transform a lot the industry.
Right, okay. And Max, what do you think? Do you think the banks are going to have a role here?
Well, let's see, over the past 300 years, looking at the paper money that's been created, the number of paper money systems that have been created over the past 300 years, the number that have survived is exactly 0. So going forward, this idea that you can base an economy on fiat money issued by central banks, I think has come under challenge now, because for the first time we have an alternative, a solid alternative in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And so now the banks who were initially reluctant to take a look at what's happening in the Bitcoin space, suddenly they started to get very interested, and in particular, Jamie Dimon over there at JP Morgan, he's becoming very vociferous. He's becoming very belligerent. He just said today that Bitcoin days are numbered. You know, he's declared war on Bitcoin. He's declared war on banking, you know, what I call the kleptocracy. He's trying to defend his turf as, again, a phrase that I use, financial terrorism. But I think his days are numbered. Him and Lloyd Blankfein and the whole insidious kleptocracy are going to be blown out of the water, not a moment too soon. We must wish for this to happen.
Right, okay. And what about you? Do you think the banks still have a role in the future?
It's really exciting sitting next to Max. I kind of want Max to just say answers for me. So yeah, you know, I think the future, if we look at a lot of the emerging initiatives by some of the leading internet companies out there, the migration to the facilitation of seamless commerce, seamless P2P payments, I think will be the real entree into whether or not cryptocurrencies can be adopted in the mainstream. You're seeing the strategy by a number of these larger marketplaces begin to accept and adopt the various currencies out there. I think the one other component to think about is if you look at companies like Venmo, for those of you familiar with Venmo here, the ability to make payments between consumers easier is something that speaks to the blurring of lines, whether it's the blurring of borders, something that we focus on at Button, the blurring of app borders or app connections. And I think really that's where you'll start to see emerge the necessity for more and more of these services or currencies to be accepted and adopted. And if you see, if you look at, for instance, Facebook Messenger, now you have the ability to transfer money to friends. And again, this is seeping into that, mentality that there is this frictionless, borderless world. And I think some of this is being led by, the folks that are focusing on Bitcoin.
Right, okay. And I wondered the role of mobile in this. I mean, what do you think? How central is this going to be?
Well, I think, for the first time, in history, the mobile device is the most personal computing device that's ever existed. It's on your person. It's used largely by you as an individual as opposed to a shared PC at the home. So this machine is the first one that takes your identity with you, takes all your accounts with you, and is always there. And so I think mobile playing a role in the growth or the virality of adoption is definitely going to be the case. I mean, you're seeing the explosive nature of growth seen by Uber and by a number of these companies that focus on mobile commerce. The reason for that is that there's more of these, more connected in more markets than any technology that's ever existed before it. Right. So I absolutely think it'll play a big role in stimulating more adoption.
What do you think, Max, on mobile?
Everything's, on mobile, everything's migrating to mobile, no question about it. And for the reasons just stated, this is the center of the digital universe, and it's also connects the digital universe. So you're not going to, it's just absolutely crucial.
And what are you guys doing just in the banking sector when it comes to...
Well, I think the other important aspect about mobile is that it's a great generation of data. And it's really the origin of the big data hype that we're living today. So this thing collects a lot of information, and I think it will collect even more in the future. We'll end up with sensors all over our bodies, and it's going to be scary. But all that information is actually very valuable. And actually, banks are in the business of managing information since hundreds of years. Probably Google has done it very quickly and very profitably. But there definitely are ways to use that information for better decisions and to monetize them. So at least for us to learn to work with such a big amount of data that comes from mobile is a challenge, and it's an opportunity as well.
Right. And I suppose cryptocurrencies, I mean, you're one of the few banks that doesn't seem to be scared absolutely shitless by this. What are you guys doing now?
Now, I think cryptocurrencies are a very fundamental, they introduce a very fundamental change or opportunity in the way we do things. And it's not so much about the aspect of Bitcoin as a store of value, which is what we are scared about. And it's not what we are scared about because it's going to eat our business. It is because we've invested a lot of money.
So you disagree with Jamie Dimon?
I wouldn't say I disagree, but I would think that digital tokens, digital currencies like this, we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time putting together Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering practices and all this, and these things are needed.
But I think that people are sick of the fact that banks put in all of this work into Know Your Customers, and yet somehow they still end up, in the case of the big four banks in the UK, laundering hundreds of billions of dollars for Mexican drug cartels, enabling financial, outright terrorism. Like, they don't seem to abide by these rules, or they do so on a selective basis. So the trust has been crushed, and there is no trust in these bigger institutions.
So the banks you can
and that's
trust...
when the Satoshi's white paper says in 2009, 2008, that this is primarily the reason for creation of the Bitcoin is the total mistrust and of the central banks and banks at large.
But isn't that the key issue now, as far as the adoption of any new thing is trust? And how do you get that? Why, you look at Bitcoin, for example, how how do you see it?
Look at the cover of this week's Economist magazine. It's the trust machine. It is trust. It is trust. It is exactly what it is. What
Wonderful.
It's
A friend of mine the other day, they actually hijacked the computer and they asked ransom using Bitcoins. You cannot do that using a Santander account. Sorry, full stop.
Yeah,
right?
but the use case of the occasional, the ransom or an occasional drug dealer Silk Road versus the wholesale financing of the war state and the warring state in the UK or the US, putting at risk millions of lives.
Yes, sure.
You have to. There's a certain trade-off there. Are you going to let a few drug dealers peddle a few drugs, or are you going to allow an entrenched, financial kleptocracy finance this enormous wealth and income gap, the war state, perpetual wars, and again, this is what they're trying to get. Bitcoin attempts to rid society of the worst excesses of this class of bankers that have proven completely untrustworthy.
But I mean, you look at Bitcoin. I mean, it's not everywhere. Why hasn't it taken over the world so far? I mean, what's the issue with
It's got 100,000 merchants adoption. The market cap is back up to $6 billion and heading to a lot higher. I mean, it is. You have the Winklevoss twins in New York have their Bitcoin trust. Barry Silbert in New York, excellent entrepreneur, went from Second Market now to his new Bitcoin group. He's running the whole Bitcoin infrastructure. So it's like any startup, I think. You have that adoption rate, then you have the classic hockey stick moment. And as failure in these various countries occurs, whether Cyprus was, they outright state confiscated wealth out of people's bank accounts, the Bitcoin adoption rate went up. In Greece, Bitcoin adoption rate goes up. In China right now, there's huge political turmoil. People are rushing into Bitcoin. The prices in China are at a $50 premium. So crisis is breeding a need to get into Bitcoin. People make the equivalent to gold and silver, but it's very hard to move a ton of silver over a border. I know, I've tried it myself, and it's not easy to do. It's bulky.
How do you try it?
But
How do you do it?
yeah, with a Bitcoin, it's like a thumb drive, and
Right.
I'm over that border toot sweet.
Right, okay. And listen, what about you? How do you see the impact of cryptocurrencies, how it's going to affect the future?
So I think, if you're thinking about the cryptocurrency world, what I think the biggest influence is the ability for nations that don't have a fiat currency that can be trusted. I think that's where this will start to play a bigger and bigger role, as evidenced by some of the figures that Max cites. I think that for us in the commerce or the mobile app and technology world, what's really exciting for us to push adoption is really that the acceptance of Bitcoin doesn't provide as much risk as perhaps you as an individual investing some of your fortune or some of your savings into Bitcoin. So the company's adoption, I think, will be a big driver of acceptance or adoption by the consumers. And that's where, in our case, my former company, Rakuten, was one of the first global internet companies to begin accepting Bitcoin. And that was something where I think as this becomes more and more mainstream and the ability for supply to be there in terms of spend and spend power, I think that's ultimately going to be what affects our industry, the technology industry, most, because that will be the new form of accepted virtual currency that's global, that's ubiquitous. And I know this, my past experience, although not tremendously relevant to Bitcoin, on the virtual currency side, I know that Rakuten, for any of you that don't know, is one of the largest internet companies in the world, based out of Japan. One of the core driving forces within that business is its virtual currency loyalty program, and it's all based on, all of you are familiar with Amazon Prime, another analog to loyalty that you can implement. But the currency programs are tremendously powerful in that they give consumers rewards, bring them back, and then ultimately they provide liquidity through the acceptance at all of the various categories of spend that consumers have. And so I think as this currency begins to be accepted by more and more retailers, that's where you'll start to see people in this room not only invest in developing technology to support it, but also putting some of our own savings into it.
You mentioned mobile before, and in areas like Africa, for example,
Yep.
enormous mobile adoption.
Yep.
And they're already using digital currency, virtual currencies. So they have leapfrogged the traditional banking arrangement. They don't have to go to the bank, open a bank, do a bank account, and go through all that. They simply open up their digital currency accounts, and they're in business. They're doing trading. So they've leapfrogged the bricks and mortar of the banks. I mean, now the banks are doing a rearguard action, the big banks, and they're like, you know, maybe we should check this out because, as Jamie Dimon said, Bitcoin threatens to eat our lunch. He's absolutely right. So they're investing in what they try to separate Bitcoin from what they say the blockchain. They say, oh, the blockchain, we love the blockchain. Why do they love the blockchain? Because it shrinks their costs. Are they going to pass that cost savings on to the consumer? Hell no. That's not what they do. They just keep it for themselves. Meanwhile, it's a private chain. It's not a distributed chain. It's not a safe chain. And when that became obvious, I think a lot of people in the last 2 months said, you know what? The pendulum's swinging back to Bitcoin. This is the only true decentralized blockchain of any merit. So now we're seeing, you know, back to the godmama, Bitcoin, and you're going to see some heavy price appreciation.
Right. Okay. And I suppose one of the key blocks to the adoption of any new technology is over-regulation and that kind of thing. I mean, where do you see cryptocurrencies and the regulatory process?
I think I see them a little bit far away from what you're saying, because I do think there is a difference between blockchain as a store of value and the underlying rails, and particularly the ability to use peer-to-peer techniques to the problem of certification of ownership and therefore transactions. I think there's a lot more than cost savings, and I don't see why those cost savings have to be pocketed by the banks. I mean, I don't know what's your bank.
That banks get a cost saving from the central bank on the loans that they make from the Fed or ECB, and they keep them on their own balance sheet. They don't actually pass it on to the consumer, who's still, you know, paying an arm and a leg for interest, right? You know, banks are not good actors in this economy. You know, they're consistently acting at odds with the interests of society.
Whatever, have it your way. Just find another planet and start over. That's fine.
No, you need.
What I can say.
Start a currency that doesn't go with that feeds an entrenched kleptocracy.
Wonderful.
You know, thank God that technology came around in such a way that would, as it has before. Banking is the last industry not to be disintermediated in this way.
Listen, the last question, because I know we're kind of running out of time. 10 years' time. What do we get? What's the world going to be like? What's the future of money? In 3 sentences, what do you think?
So I think in the currency world, there will be a universal currency that's accepted, whether that's Bitcoin or some iteration on top of a blockchain technology. And I think that will be a reality in 10 years' time.
Right, okay. What about you, Max?
The dollar, the yen, the euro will go the way of all other paper currencies into the oblivion, and we'll have crypto and gold and silver.
And what about you?
I think money will be cryptographic. There will be central banks, and they will be issuing these currencies on top of that chain. And banks or service providers, or banks will be providing services like advisory service, credit service, which is putting price to risk. And this is something that needs to be done, whether the ledger is centralized or decentralized. And the very nature of money, I think it will be digital, it will be trackable, and it will be smart, which is something we've not been talking about.
Great. Listen, thank you very much. That was really interesting. So, nice.
All right.